I came back on a Wednesday afternoon with one duffel bag, my laptop, and boots. I still cleaned out of habit. I wasn't on leave long. Just a short break between assignments, the kind you spend catching up on sleep and paperwork. I didn't come home looking for a parade or closure. I needed a place to land, reset, and get ready to go back. The house on Oak Ridge Drive looked the same from the curb. Same siding, same narrow driveway. The mailbox still leaned a little to the left. Mom used to complain about that. She never fixed it. Said it reminded her the place had character. I parked on the street and sat there for a second, engine off, keys in my hand. The quiet felt normal. The kind you get used to when you spend years moving between bases and rentals. You stop expecting things to welcome you. I knocked once. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. The door opened halfway, and Heather looked out at me like she was checking a delivery she didn't remember ordering. "Oh," she said. "You're here." Her tone wasn't rude. It wasn't warm either. Just factual. Like we were neighbors who'd met once at a block party. I nodded. "Hey." She stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come in. Just shoes off, please. I just cleaned." I looked down at my boots. I'd been on 3 flights in a rental car. They weren't muddy. But I took them off anyway and set them by the door. Old habit. You don't argue small rules when you're tired. The house smelled different. Lavender, maybe? Something herbal. The couch from the living room was gone. In its place were 2 low chairs and a shelf with candles and framed quotes. I didn't stop to read them. I just stood there holding my duffel, waiting for her to tell me where to go. So Heather said, already walking down the hallway, "I've got a couple calls this afternoon, but I can show you your space real quick." Your space. Not your room. Not the guest room. Just your space. She opened a door at the end of the hall. Inside was a small bedroom. Bed. Nightstand. No dresser. No closet. A mini fridge sat in the corner with a note taped to it. "Please label anything you put in here. It's temporary," she said, like she could read my face. "I just need to keep things organized." "Sure," I said. She smiled, quick and tight. Bathrooms shared. Laundry's on Sundays. And I try to keep noise down after 9. I nodded again. I was too tired to ask where Mom's things were or what had happened to the house while I was gone. That could wait. Everything could wait until I'd slept. Heather turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and I've got a couple people coming by this weekend. Workshops, just so you're aware." "Workshops," I repeated. "Yeah, it's how I'm keeping things afloat right now." Right now sounded permanent, but I didn't say that. When she left, I closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed. It creaked. The room was clean, but stripped down like someone had removed anything that might suggest comfort. I set my duffel on the floor and didn't open it. I lay back and stared at the ceiling until my eyes finally closed. I woke up to voices in the kitchen and the sound of a kettle. My phone said 6:42 a.m. I pulled on a hoodie and walked out. Heather was already dressed, tapping at her phone. Her daughter Olivia sat at the table with earbuds and scrolling. "Morning," Heather said, bright. "Coffee's not really my thing anymore, but there's tea." "I'm good," I said, and filled a glass with water. The fridge was full of things I didn't recognize. Oat milk, kombucha, no eggs, no butter, not even creamer. I closed it. Heather watched me. I try to keep the food aligned with what works for the house. "The house," I said. She smiled again. "It's important to be consistent." I took my water back to the room and shut the door. From down the hall, I could hear her on a call. Her voice softened, stretched. She sounded practiced, calm, like someone explaining boundaries to people who paid to hear it. Later that morning, I asked about parking. "Oh," she said, "I usually keep the driveway open for clients. You can use the street." "That's fine. And just so you know," she added, "I'll need to keep the common areas clear during sessions. It helps with focus." "Understood." She seemed relieved I didn't push back. I was relieved too. I didn't have the energy for friction. Over the next few days, I learned the rhythm of the place. Doors closed when clients were around. Quiet signs went up in the hallway. I moved my boots to the garage after someone mentioned tracking in outside energy. I didn't argue. None of it felt worth the effort. Heather was busy, always on calls, always planning something. She talked about growth and balance like they were inventory items. When she spoke to me, it was polite and efficient, like we had a schedule to maintain. One afternoon, she handed me a printed sheet. House guidelines. Times for laundry. A note about labeling food. A reminder to avoid loud phone calls. I just want to keep things fair, she said. Fair, I repeated. She nodded. Everyone contributes. I didn't ask who everyone was. I didn't ask how long this setup had been in place. I'd learned a long time ago that questions change the temperature in a room. Sometimes you're better off letting things show you what they are. That night I sat on the bed with my laptop open, catching up on admin work. Emails, forms, the boring stuff that follows you no matter where you go. I could hear Heather laughing with someone in the kitchen. Plates clinked. The house sounded full in a way it hadn't earlier. I shut the laptop and leaned back. The room felt smaller than it had that morning. Not physically, just tighter. Like I was standing in a space that had already decided how much of me it was willing to hold. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Mostly I was tired. And when you're tired, you notice details you usually ignore. Where you're allowed to sit. Where you're not. How long someone waits before answering your questions. The way a house shifts when it stops being neutral. I didn't come home expecting things to be the same. I just hadn't expected them to be so clearly arranged without me in them. I slid my boots farther under the bed with my foot and shut the door with my elbow, careful not to let it click. The hallway outside was already quiet, the kind of quiet that meant someone else had decided the rules for it. By the end of the week, I understood the system. Not because Heather explained it, but because the house corrected you if you stepped out of line. Doors closed when they needed to. Lights went off in rooms you weren't using. Notes appeared where you'd left something out of place. Nothing aggressive. Nothing you could point to and say, this is wrong. Just enough pressure to make you adjust. Heather liked schedules. She printed them and taped them to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a leaf. Laundry days. Kitchen windows. Quiet hours. The rules weren't unreasonable on paper. That was the trick. Each one made sense by itself. Together they shrank your world. I learned to make breakfast early before her call started. I learned which cabinet I was allowed to use. Bottom shelf left side. I learned not to sit in the living room unless invited. The low chairs and candles weren't for watching TV. They were for sessions. Even when no one was there, the space felt reserved. When I asked where I could keep my boots, she paused like she hadn't considered that question yet. The garage would be better, she said. I'm trying to keep the house clean. Got it. And maybe your duffel too, she added. It'll free up the room. I carried my things out myself. The garage smelled like dust and old paint. Half the shelves were stacked with boxes labeled in black marker. Seasonal. Retreat supplies. Miscellaneous. I set my boots under a workbench and zipped my bag shut again. Heather watched from the doorway. Thanks for being flexible, she said. Flexible. I'd been called worse things in better places. She had people coming through most days, mostly women. Some older, some my age. They took off their shoes at the door and spoke in low voices like they were entering a church. Heather greeted them with the same calm smile she used on me, just warmer. She offered tea. Asked how they were holding up. The house filled with soft music and words like intention and alignment. I stayed out of the way. That wasn't hard. There wasn't much space left for me to be in. One afternoon I came back from a run and found my towel folded on the dryer with a sticky note on top. Please don't leave damp items in shared spaces. I stared at it longer than I needed to. The towel was dry. But I folded it anyway and carried it back to my room. At dinner that night, Heather mentioned utilities. Not directly. Just in passing. The water bill's been higher lately, she said, scrolling on her phone. It adds up fast with more people in the house. I don't take long showers, I said. She looked up surprised. I wasn't accusing you. I just think it's good to be aware. Of course. Olivia sat at the table pushing food around her plate. She didn't look at either of us. Heather smiled at her. How was school? Fine. That's good, Heather said. We like calm energy at the table. I finished eating and washed my plate. I dried it and put it on the rack exactly where she liked things to go. She didn't thank me. She didn't need to. The house was already keeping score. By the second week, my room changed. Not physically, functionally. A lamp disappeared. Then the extra chair. I needed it for a session, Heather said. You don't really use it, right? I didn't argue. I didn't need the chair. The garage became my default. I answered emails out there, sitting on an upside-down crate. The Wi-Fi barely reached, but if I stood near the door, it worked. Heather passed by once and glanced at me. That might actually be better for focus, she said. Less distraction. I nodded. Yeah, she liked that answer. She liked it when things lined up with what she'd already decided. One morning, I came back from the grocery store with a small bag. Coffee, eggs, bread, nothing wild. Heather saw it on the counter and frowned slightly. I'm trying to keep animal products limited, she said. It affects the space. I'll keep it in my room. She hesitated. The mini fridge is shared. I'll label it. She smiled again, relieved. Perfect. I started to see the pattern clearly then. She never said no outright. She framed everything as a shared effort. Balance, respect, fairness. Words that sound good until you realize only one person gets to define them. The house wasn't hostile. It was managed. On Thursday evening, Heather handed me another printed page. Updated guidelines. I skimmed it. New quiet hours. New note about guests. A line about contributing to household costs. This is just for clarity, she said. I don't want anything to feel uneven. Uneven how? She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I mean, everyone here benefits from the space. I looked at her. Everyone. She met my eyes. You're staying here, right? For now. Exactly, she said, satisfied. That night I lay on the bed with the lights off, listening to the house settle. Pipes ticking. A door closing somewhere. The faint sound of Heather's voice through the wall, calm and steady, explaining boundaries to someone on speakerphone. I wasn't angry. Still wasn't. But something had shifted from discomfort to awareness. This wasn't temporary in her mind. This was structure. And structures don't move unless something pushes back. I checked my phone. No missed calls. No emergencies. Just a calendar reminder for the next week's briefing back on base. Orders waiting. A job I knew how to do. I rolled onto my side and stared at the wall. The rules weren't about cleanliness or balance. They were about ownership. Who decided where things went? Who got to stay? Who had to adapt? I'd adapted my whole career. I knew how to follow systems. I also knew how to read them. The house had made its position clear. I was here under conditions. And conditions once written down tend to lead somewhere. I lifted the garage door just enough to slide under it and felt the cool concrete through my socks. The hinge squeaked, and I made a note to remember that sound. Little noises mattered in this house. They told you when you'd crossed an invisible line. The garage wasn't meant to be lived in. That was obvious. One bare bulb, a shelf that leaned, boxes stacked without any order that made sense to me. I cleared a small space near the back wall and set down my bag. It wasn't permanent. It didn't need to be. I'd slept in worse places for longer stretches. This was just logistics. Heather framed it as a convenience. It'll give you more privacy, she said when she noticed my things weren't in the room anymore. And it keeps the main house calmer. Calmer for who wasn't something she asked out loud. The garage became my buffer zone. I changed there, took calls there, sat on the floor with my back against the wall and answered emails. When the Wi-Fi dropped, I tethered my phone and kept going. No complaints. Complaints turned into conversations and conversations turned into rules. Inside the house, the adjustments kept coming. The kitchen cabinet I used gained a label. Camille. One shelf. My name in marker like a warning more than an invitation. Heather said it was helpful. So everyone knew what belonged where. Organization prevents tension, she said. I nodded. Makes sense. She seemed pleased. She liked it when I agreed. Agreement made her feel generous. The living room stopped being a room I could pass through casually. If I crossed it while clients were there, Heather would pause mid-sentence and glance at me, polite but firm. The look said, not now. I started timing my movements. Bathroom trips, water refills, anything that required stepping into shared space. One afternoon, I sat on the steps outside with my boots on, tying the laces tight. Heather opened the door and watched me for a moment. "Could you keep shoes off inside?" she said, "even if you're just passing through." I wasn't going inside. She smiled like that cleared things up. Perfect. I ran longer that day. Not because I needed to, because it was the only place I didn't feel managed. The street didn't care where I put my feet. The air didn't come with guidelines. When I got back, a woman I didn't recognize was standing in the driveway talking to Heather. She glanced at me, then looked away quickly like she wasn't sure if she was supposed to acknowledge me. "That's my sister Heather," said her hand light on the woman's arm. "She's staying temporarily." Temporarily. Again. The woman nodded politely. "Oh, that's nice." Heather turned back to her. "We're working on boundaries." I kept walking. The garage door rolled down behind me, cutting off their voices. That night, Heather knocked on the garage door. A light knock. Controlled. "I just wanted to check in," she said. "I hope you're comfortable out here." "I'm fine." She hesitated. "I know this might feel like a lot of structure, but it's really about fairness. Everyone here contributes." I leaned against the shelf. "Contributes how?" "Well," she said carefully, "time, energy, resources." "Resources." She nodded. "Utilities, space, wear and tear. It all adds up." I didn't respond. Silence made people keep talking. "I'm not asking for anything right now," she added quickly. "I just want us to be aligned." Aligned. Another word that sounded harmless until it was used to correct you. After she left, I sat on the floor and ate a granola bar from my bag. It tasted like cardboard. I drank water from a bottle I kept hidden behind a box. It wasn't dramatic. It was just smaller. Everything was getting smaller. The next morning, I found my chair gone from the room. The one piece of furniture I'd had besides the bed. Heather was in the kitchen when I asked. "I needed it," she said. "One of the clients has back issues." "Okay." She looked relieved again. "Thank you for understanding." Understanding was easy. Being understood wasn't part of the arrangement. Olivia started avoiding the house when she could. She stayed late at school, hung out at friends' places. When she was home, she moved quietly like she'd learned the same rules I had. We crossed paths in the hallway once, and she gave me a small, quick smile. Nothing else. Heather noticed. She always noticed. "I try to model healthy dynamics for her," she said one evening. "Kids absorb everything." "I'm sure," I said. She studied me for a moment. "You're very contained." "I've had practice." She nodded like that explained everything she needed it to. By the third week, the garage felt less like overflow space and more like a decision. Heather stopped asking if I was okay out there. She started reminding me to keep the door closed. It helps with temperature control. I fixed the loose hinge with a wrench I found in a box. It stopped squeaking. That felt like progress. A new sign appeared on the door to the house. "Please text before entering during sessions." Heather hadn't mentioned it. She didn't need to. The sign said what she didn't have to. I adjusted again. Texted before entering. Waited for a reply. Sometimes it came right away. Sometimes it didn't. I learned which sessions ran long. The house wasn't pushing me out with force. It was narrowing the path until there wasn't much left to walk. One afternoon, I overheard Heather on the phone. Her voice carried through the wall, soft and confident. "Some people struggle with accountability," she said, "especially when they're used to being taken care of." I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. She continued. "It's important to set limits, even with family." I finished typing my email and closed the laptop. The words stayed with me not because they hurt, but because they clarified things. This wasn't about conflict. It was about control framed as care. That evening, Heather left another sheet on the counter. Updated household expectations. A line about shared expenses stood out, underlined once. "We'll talk soon," she said as she passed me in the hallway. I watched her walk away barefoot, confident like the house had agreed to carry her weight and not mine. I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. Not because I planned to follow it, because I wanted to remember the moment when everything stopped being implied and started being written down. Structures don't apologize. They just tighten. I pulled the folded paper out of my pocket and smoothed it against my thigh, feeling the crease flatten under my fingers. The list wasn't long. A few bullet points, quiet hours, shared expenses, contribution expectations. It read like something you'd hand to a tenant, not a sister. I left it on the workbench in the garage and went inside to wash my hands. Heather was in the kitchen measuring something into a mug. "Did you see the update?" she asked without looking up. "I saw it," she nodded. "We'll talk." That was her favorite phrase lately. It didn't mean conversation. It meant compliance after reflection. I stepped back out and closed the garage door behind me. The air inside felt heavier than usual, like the walls had leaned in a fraction. I sat on the crate and opened my laptop. Not to argue, not to vent, just to check something that had been sitting at the edge of my attention for days. The house had never felt like it belonged to Heather. Not in the way ownership settles into a place. She rearranged furniture. She changed smells. She added rules. But she didn't talk about maintenance or taxes or insurance. Those things come up naturally when something is yours. They slip into conversation without effort. I logged into the county website and pulled up property records. It took less than a minute to find the address. Oak Ridge Drive. Same parcel number I remembered from years ago, back when Mom used to ask me to help her with paperwork over the phone. Owner of record. The name was there. It wasn't Heather's. I didn't react. I didn't feel a rush or relief. Just confirmation of something I hadn't let myself articulate yet. Records don't argue. They don't posture. They either line up or they don't. The tax payments were current. Paid through an account I didn't recognize. The mailing address wasn't Heather's. It was a P.O. box. Oh, but not hers. I closed the laptop and sat there for a minute, listening to the hum of the garage fridge. The sound was steady, reliable. That mattered more than emotion. The next morning, I asked Heather about the garage lights. "One of them flickers," I said. "I can fix it." She waved it off. "It's fine. That space isn't really meant for long-term use." "Okay." She poured herself tea. "I've been meaning to talk to you about something." I waited. "I just want to make sure expectations are clear," she said. "This setup works best when everyone takes responsibility." "For what?" "For their share." "Which is—" She hesitated. "We'll get there." I nodded and stepped away. There was no point pressing. Pressure only made her retreat into language. That afternoon, I drove into town and parked outside the county clerk's office. I didn't go in. I didn't need to. Everything I needed was online. Deed history, filing dates, probate status. Mom's estate had been opened. Briefly, then closed. No contest. No amendments filed afterward. I sat in the car and stared at the building. This wasn't some buried secret. It was paperwork. Ordinary, boring paperwork. The kind people overlook because it doesn't make noise. When I got back, Heather had company. A woman sat at the kitchen table, notebook open, nodding along as Heather spoke. "I'm holding space for transition," Heather said. "Some people resist change." The woman glanced at me, curious. Heather didn't introduce me. I went straight to the garage and shut the door. That night I slept on the floor. Not because the bed was gone, because the floor was cooler and I needed the clarity. I lay there staring at the underside of the workbench, counting the screws holding it together. 4. Solid. In the morning I checked my email. A message from base ops about my next assignment. Timeline confirmed. I'd be leaving again soon. That fact sharpened everything. This wasn't theoretical. It had an end date whether I liked it or not. Heather knocked on the garage door later that day. "Do you have a minute?" I stood up and wiped my hands on my pants. "Sure." She didn't come in. She stayed in the doorway, arms crossed loosely. "I think we should talk about finances." "Okay." She took a breath. "Utilities have gone up. Food. We're on the house. It's only fair that you contribute while you're here." "How much?" She named a number. It wasn't outrageous. It was deliberate. Low enough to sound reasonable. High enough to establish precedent. I didn't answer right away. "It's temporary," she added. "Just until things rebalance." Rebalance meant something different to her than it did to me. "I'll think about it," I said. Her shoulders relaxed. "Thank you. I knew you'd understand." After she left, I pulled the folded paper back out and looked at the underlined line again. Shared expenses. Contribution expectations. The words sat there neat and confident like they'd always belonged. I opened my laptop and checked the property insurance. The The policy was active. Mom's name was still on it. Beneficiary listed. Me. I didn't smile. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt grounded. The way you do when you find a handhold you didn't know was there. That evening, Olivia came into the garage without knocking. She hovered near the door hands in her pockets. Mom says dinner's at 6, she said. Thanks. She hesitated. She also says, never mind. I waited, but she shook her head and turned to leave. Hey, I said. She stopped. You doing okay? She shrugged. It's just loud sometimes. Yeah, I said. I get that. She gave a small nod and left. I closed the door and sat back down. The garage felt less like exile now and more like distance. Distance I could work with. Heather wanted to talk numbers. She wanted agreement. She wanted the structure to feel mutual. What she didn't realize was that once things are written down, they stop being personal. They become measurable. I opened a new document and started listing dates. Payments, filings, names, nothing dramatic. Just facts lined up in order. The kind of order I trusted. The house was quiet that night. No sessions, no voices. Just the sound of the refrigerator cycling and the faint tick of the wall clock inside. I set my alarm for early and turned off the light. The floor was hard, but it didn't shift. That mattered. When control turns into paperwork, it stops being invisible. And once you can see it clearly, you can decide what to do with it. I stood at the sink rinsing a mug when Heather cleared her throat behind me. Not loudly, just enough to signal she wanted my attention without asking for it. Can we talk for a second, she said. I set the mug upside down on the towel and turned around. The kitchen was clean in that staged way it always was before guests arrived. Candles lined up. Counters empty. The house didn't look lived in. It looked prepared. She gestured towards the table. 2 chairs were already pulled out. She'd planned this. I've been thinking about our situation, she said, folding her hands together. And I want to make sure we're being fair to each other. Fair again. I'm listening, I said. She nodded, relieved I wasn't pushing back. I really value harmony in this house. And part of that is making sure no one feels taken advantage of. Who feels taken advantage of? She smiled like that was a misunderstanding. That's not what I said. I'm just trying to keep things balanced. She slid a printed sheet across the table. It was the same guidelines page updated again. This time, there was a number at the bottom. Monthly. Utilities included. I read it once. Then again, this is rent, I said. It's a contribution, she corrected. Words matter. How much time do I have to decide? She tilted her head. I was hoping you'd be on board already. I looked past her out the window where one of her clients was pulling into the driveway. Another woman followed in a second car. They parked carefully like they'd been coached. Heather noticed my glance. We can finish later if now's not good. No, I said. Now's fine. Her smile tightened. Okay. She took a breath. I need you to either start contributing financially or find another place to stay. I can't keep carrying this. There it was. No lavender language. No balance metaphors. Just the line. Pay rent or get out. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I didn't even change my expression. I just sat there and let the words land. One of the women in the hallway paused, pretending not to listen. Another hovered near the counter phone in hand, eyes flicking between us. Heather didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she did, and didn't care. This isn't personal, she said a little louder now. It's about boundaries. Understood, I said. She blinked. So what? Which option are you choosing? I stood up and picked up my mug. I'll take care of it. Her shoulders dropped. Thank you. I knew you'd see reason. I didn't correct her. I went back to the garage and shut the door. I sat on the crate and stared at the wall until the noise in the house faded into muffled voices and soft music. The sentence replayed in my head not because it hurt, but because it clarified. Pay rent or get out. That wasn't a request. It was a claim. A claim only works if the person making it has the authority to back it up. I opened my laptop and pulled up the county records again. Same result. Same owner. Same filing. No ambiguity. I clicked through this probate docket. Case closed. No pending motions. No challenges. Nothing Heather could lean on. I took a screenshot and saved it. Then another. Then downloaded the full record. Dates, signatures, Clerk stamps. Boring, beautiful facts. That afternoon, Heather knocked again. Lighter this time. Casual. I just wanted to check in, she said. No pressure. I know these things take time. I said I'd take care of it. She smiled, satisfied. Perfect. As she walked away, she added, I'll need the first payment by the end of the week. I didn't respond. I drove into town and sat in the parking lot outside a small law office with faded lettering on the window. Ellis and Keene. Probate and property. I'd passed it 100 times growing up and never paid attention. Inside, the receptionist handed me a clipboard. Consultation. Yes, I filled out my name and address. Oak Ridge Drive. It felt strange to write it, even though it was accurate. The attorney, Mark Ellis, was in his late 40s, hair going gray at the temples. He skimmed the documents I'd printed and nodded slowly. You're the sole owner, he said. No question. She's been living there, I said. Running a business. He shrugged. Doesn't matter. She has no legal claim. She's asking me to pay rent. He looked up. To her, yes. He let out a short breath. That's not how this works. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. I just asked what steps I needed to take. He outlined them. Clean. Simple. Notice requirements. Options. Rights. No drama. I paid the consultation fee and walked out with a clear head. Back at the house, the driveway was full. More clients. More candles. The house hummed with intention. Heather caught me by the door. Everything okay? Yeah. Good, she said. I'm glad we talked. So was I. That night, I moved the rest of my things into the garage. Not because I had to, because it made the lines clearer. I folded my clothes, stacked my boots, packed my laptop away when I wasn't using it. The space was small, but it was contained. Containment had always worked for me. Heather didn't comment. She didn't need to. In her mind, the issue was settled. She'd set terms. I'd agreed to take care of it. I lay on the floor and stared up at the rafters, listening to the house settle above me. Footsteps. Laughter. Music fading out. Pay rent or get out wasn't a threat. It was a mistake. And mistakes, once documented, tend to correct themselves. I set my alarm for early again and closed my eyes, already moving through the list of things that needed to be done next, not as reactions, but as steps. I woke before my alarm and rolled my shoulders to loosen the stiffness from the concrete. The garage was cold in the mornings, and I liked that. Cold keeps you alert. I pulled on my hoodie, laced my boots, and stepped outside without making a sound. The house was quiet. No music, no voices. I stood in the driveway and checked my phone. Emails, a calendar reminder. Nothing urgent. I made coffee with the small press I kept in my bag and drank it standing up, watching the sky lighten. I stopped talking to Heather after that. Not in a dramatic way. I answered questions if she asked them directly. Short answers, no opinions, no explanations. Silence works when you use it consistently. She noticed. Of course she did. Everything okay? She asked one afternoon as I passed through the kitchen to refill my water bottle. Yeah. You've been a little distant. I've been busy. She nodded slowly, like she was filing that away. Just remember, we're all trying to make this work. I know. That was enough. Anything more would have turned into a conversation. Conversations were how she kept control. I shifted into a routine that felt familiar. Wake early. Move deliberately. Handle one task at a time. No emotion attached. The same way you prep for an inspection or a deployment. You don't think about how you feel. You focus on what's required. I printed everything. Deed history, probate records, tax statements, insurance documents. I labeled a folder and slid it into my bag. Then another. Dates on the tabs. Names spelled correctly. No shortcuts. During the day, I made calls from the garage. County clerk. Insurance office. Utilities. I didn't tell anyone the story. I didn't need to. I asked specific questions and wrote down the answers. Facts don't care about context. The utilities were still in Mom's name. That caught my attention. Heather talked about shared expenses, but she hadn't changed the accounts. That kind of detail gets missed when someone assumes ownership without formalizing it. I paid the small balance on the water bill myself and kept the receipt. Not to be nice. To establish a record. Heather mentioned money again that evening. Just a reminder, she said, leaning against the counter. End of the week. I heard you, she smiled. I appreciate you being cooperative. Cooperative. Another word that only worked one way. I didn't argue. I didn't clarify. I went back to the garage and updated my list. Itemize. Track. Verify. The next morning, I drove to the post office and rented a P.O. box. It took 10 minutes. I forwarded my mail there and updated my address with my bank. Small moves, clean lines. I started photographing the house. Not the decor. The structure. The roof line. The electrical panel. The water heater. Condition documentation. Time-stamped. Heather walked by once and raised an eyebrow. What's that for? She asked. Records. Records of what? The house. She laughed lightly. You're very thorough. I didn't respond. She started getting sloppy after that, leaving papers on the counter, talking louder on the phone. She believed the situation was resolved. In her mind, the terms were set. I'd either pay or leave. Either way, she won. One afternoon, I overheard her on a call. Some people don't understand how much it takes to hold a space, she said. They think just showing up is enough. I closed my laptop and waited until the call ended before stepping inside. Olivia was at the table doing homework. She glanced up at me, then back down. Your mom wants to know if you've decided, she said quietly. Decided what? She shrugged. About staying. I filled my bottle and set it down. Tell her I'm handling it. Olivia nodded. She looked tired. Not angry, just worn down by the constant managing. I recognized that look. Heather cornered me later that night. Not literally. She stood in the hallway while I tried to pass. I need clarity, she said. Are you paying or not? I'm taking care of it, I repeated. That's not an answer. It's the one you're getting. Her jaw tightened. I can't run this place with uncertainty. I'm not stopping you. She stared at me for a long moment like she was trying to recalibrate. Silence made her uncomfortable. It always had. I just need things to be fair, she said. Then we're on the same page. She stepped aside, unsatisfied. That night I organized my folders again. Deed, probate, utilities, notes from the attorney, everything in order. I added a timeline at the front. Dates in sequence, no gaps. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even hurt. I felt focused. Focus is quieter than rage. It doesn't ask for witnesses. The garage became a workspace instead of a holding area. I set up a small folding table, kept my laptop charged, checked items off my list. Heather stopped commenting on where I spent my time. She assumed it meant compliance. On Friday morning, I mailed a certified letter. Not to Heather, to the county recorder. A request for a certified copy of the deed and probate closure. Tracking number. Receipt saved. I also emailed Mark Ellis to confirm next steps. He replied with 2 lines. You're covered. Call me if she escalates. She didn't escalate. She smoothed. She smiled more. She told her clients things were settling into balance. She believed she'd applied pressure and gotten results. I let her believe that. The end of the week came and went. She didn't mention payment again. Not directly. She waited for me to bring it up. When I didn't, she shifted tactics. We should revisit expectations, she said over dinner. Voice calm, eyes sharp. I'll let you know when there's something to revisit. Her fork paused midair. That's not how shared living works. This isn't shared living. The words slipped out before I considered them. Not loud, not aggressive, just factual. She stared at me. Then she laughed a short sound. Okay. She stood and cleared her plate conversation over. I went back to the garage and shut the door. The hinge stayed quiet. I sat down and opened my email. The county confirmation came through. Documents attached. I downloaded them and saved them to the folder. The timeline was complete now. Clean, no loose ends. Military mode doesn't feel dramatic when you're in it. It feels boring, efficient, like progress you don't announce. I closed the laptop and leaned back against the wall. The house above me hummed with activity, unaware that the structure it rested on had already been measured, logged, and prepared for a different outcome. I spread the printed pages across the folding table and weighed them down with a wrench so the corners wouldn't curl. The garage light flickered once, then steadied. Deed copy on the left. Probate closure on the right. Insurance policy underneath. Everything lined up the way it was supposed to. The will took longer to arrive than the deed. Not because it was hidden, just because no one rushes paperwork that doesn't scream. When the certified envelope showed up at my P.O. box, it was thin, ordinary. The kind of mail you'd overlook if you weren't expecting it. I opened it in the driver's seat and read the first paragraph twice to make sure I wasn't filling in gaps with what I wanted to see. I wasn't. It was direct. No poetry. No conditions. Mom had named a personal representative, outlined a few modest bequests, and then without drama assigned the house to me. Not shared. Not contingent. Just mine. I folded the pages carefully and sat there for a minute with the engine off. There was no rush of emotion. No wave. Mostly there was recognition. Mom had always been practical. She planned for outcomes, not feelings. She trusted follow-through. That was the whole point. Back at the house, Heather was hosting another session. The driveway was full. I carried the envelope into the garage and slid the will into the folder behind the deed exactly where it belonged. I didn't confront her. I didn't test her with questions. I watched. Watching tells you more. Heather talked about fairness like it was a moral position instead of a strategy. She spoke about responsibility as if she'd invented it. When clients asked how long she'd lived there, she said years and smiled. When they asked about ownership, she redirected. It's complicated, she said. Family stuff. Family stuff is what people say when the facts don't help them. I checked the insurance again and called the agent to confirm coverage. Everything's current, he said. Policyholder is Alice Brooks. Beneficiary is you. Has there been any attempt to change that? No, he said. None on record. I thanked him and hung up. Heather noticed the calls. She noticed everything. You've been very busy, she said that evening, leaning against the counter. I told you. Busy with what? Logistics. She laughed lightly. You always were like that. Very task-oriented. That's one word for it. She studied me. I hope you're not overthinking things. This doesn't have to be complicated. It isn't. Her smile thinned. Good. I watched her walk away and felt the difference between assumption and proof settle into place. She wasn't evil. She wasn't plotting. She just stepped into a vacuum and decided it fit her. When people do that long enough, they stop checking whether the space was theirs to begin with. Olivia came into the garage that night slower this time. She held a piece of mail. This came for you, she said. It was in the stack. Thanks. She didn't leave right away. Mom's stressed, she added, like that explains something. I know. She says you're making things tense. I looked at her. Do you feel tense? She shrugged. I feel like I'm supposed to pick a side. You're not. She nodded, relieved, and slipped back into the house. The next day, Heather brought up money again. Not the number. The concept. I'm trying to plan ahead, she said. It helps to know what to expect. From who? From you, she said, patient now. If you're staying. I am. Then we need clarity. I met her eyes. You already have it. She frowned. That's not an answer. It's the only one I'm giving. She crossed her arms. I don't understand why you're being difficult. I'm not. You're withholding. I nodded once. Yes. She stared at me, then laughed short and sharp. Okay, fine. She walked away like she'd won something. That was the part she didn't get. Silence wasn't retreat. It was space. That afternoon, I met Mark Ellis again. I handed him the will and watched his eyes track the lines. Clear, he said. Very clear. She's been asking me to pay rent, I said. He looked up. To her? Yes. He shook his head. You don't owe her anything. If anything she owes you, use an occupancy. I'm not interested in collecting. Then you have options, he said. You can formalize possession. Or you can sell. I didn't answer right away. If you sell, he continued, she gets notice as an occupant. Not as an owner. How much notice? Depends how you do it. 30 days is clean. I nodded. Okay. Back in the garage, I added a new line to the timeline. Will received. Verified. Attorney confirmation. I didn't highlight it. It didn't need emphasis. Heather was louder that evening, talking fast, laughing harder. She sensed the shift, even if she didn't understand it yet. Control feels different when it's slipping. People overcorrect. She cornered me by the sink. I don't like secrets, she said. Then don't keep any. That's not fair. Neither is charging rent for something you don't own. The words landed flat. No accusation. no heat. Her face changed. Just a flicker. Then the smile came back. "I don't know what you think you know," she said, "but this isn't the time." I rinsed my hands and dried them. "It is for me." She opened her mouth, then closed it. "We'll talk later." I nodded and walked past her. In the garage, I reorganized the folders again, not because they needed it, but because it steadied me. Facts in order, dates aligned. No room for interpretation. The truth wasn't dramatic. It didn't shout. It sat there documented, waiting for someone to stop pretending it was negotiable. I shut the garage door with my hip and slid the bolt into place, then sat at the folding table and opened the laptop. The screen glowed in the dim light, familiar and steady. This was the part I trusted. No tone, no audience, just steps. I emailed Mark Ellis a single sentence. "Ready to proceed." He replied a few minutes later with a checklist. Clean. Numbered. No commentary. I followed it in order. First, I authorized a quiet title check. No announcements. No filings that would tip anyone off. Just confirmation that nothing unexpected was lurking. The report came back the next morning. Clear. Next, I contacted a local agent a colleague had used years earlier. I didn't explain the situation. I didn't need to. I asked about timing cash buyers and discretion. She asked if I had authority to sell. I said yes. She asked if the property was occupied. I said yes. She asked if that would be an issue. I said no. She paused, then said, "Understood." I scheduled a walkthrough for a time Heather would be out. She was always out on Tuesdays. Workshops across town. Predictable. While that moved forward, I handled the smaller things. I transferred utilities into my name. I updated insurance to reflect current occupancy. I kept receipts, dated everything. Heather noticed the mail change first. "Did you forward the bills?" she asked, holding an envelope. I updated the accounts, I said. She frowned. "Why?" "So they're accurate." "They were fine." "They weren't." She studied me. "You're making things complicated." "I'm making them correct." She opened her mouth, then closed it. "I don't like feeling out of the loop." "Then check the paperwork." She didn't laugh this time. The agent came through the side gate on Tuesday morning, clipboard in hand. We walked the exterior first. Roof, foundation, windows. She asked about recent repairs. "None major," I said. "Standard maintenance." Inside, she moved efficiently, making notes without commenting on the decor. When she asked about ownership, I handed her a copy of the deed. She glanced at it once and nodded. "This should move," she said, quietly. "That's the goal." We discussed pricing. Comparable sales. Condition. I didn't push for a number that sounded impressive. I wanted one that sounded normal. She suggested a range. I picked the middle. "Cash buyers will like it," she said. "That's fine." When she left, I locked the gate and went back to the garage. I scanned her notes and added them to the folder. Another item checked. Heather came home earlier than usual that afternoon. She stood in the kitchen, purse still on her shoulder, eyes sharp. "Did someone come by?" she asked. "Yes." "Who?" "An agent." Her mouth tightened. "For what?" "The house." She laughed, but it came out wrong. "You're kidding." "No." She stared at me like I'd switched languages. "You can't just—" "I can." She shook her head. "This is my home." "It's the house I said." "There's a difference." She stepped closer. "You're trying to scare me." "I don't scare people." "You think this is funny?" "No." She searched my face for something she could use. She didn't find it. Silence makes people desperate for leverage. "This is incredibly disrespectful," she said. I nodded. "That's an opinion." She stormed out of the room and slammed a cabinet door. A candle toppled and rolled across the counter. I set it upright and went back to the garage. The listing went live privately. No public photos, no sign in the yard. Just a quiet note sent to a small list of buyers who knew what they were looking at. 2 inquiries came in within 48 hours. I reviewed the offers on my laptop sitting on the crate feet planted on concrete. One was higher but contingent. One was clean. Cash, short close. I forwarded both to Mark Ellis. He replied with a single line. "Take the clean one." I did. Heather noticed the change in tone around the house before she noticed anything else. Fewer people. Shorter sessions. She talked faster. She watched me when she thought I wasn't looking. "Are you trying to push me out?" she asked one night, arms crossed. I'm handling my property. That's not an answer. It's the only one that matters. She scoffed. You're doing this to punish me. I shrugged. I'm doing it to resolve things. She laughed again, sharp and brittle. You always do this. Hide behind procedure. I met her eyes. Procedure is how things stay fair. She walked away, muttering about control and rigidity. I let her. The buyer's inspectors came through 2 days later. Quick, efficient, no drama. I fixed a loose outlet cover and noted it on the report. Transparency keeps people from asking questions later. Heather hovered in the doorway, arms tight to her sides. You're selling, she said. Yes. You didn't even ask me. There's nothing to ask. She shook her head. You're unbelievable. I closed the inspector's report and slid it into the folder. I'm consistent. That night I drafted the notice with Mark Ellis. Plain language. No accusations. 30 days. Proper service. He handled delivery. I didn't watch when it arrived. I didn't need to. I heard the change in the house instead. The quiet wasn't controlled anymore. It was brittle. Heather tried to talk to me again, softer this time. We can work something out, she said. You don't have to rush. I'm not rushing. You're not listening. I am. She searched my face again. Still nothing. Olivia stopped me in the hallway. Mom's upset, she said, eyes wide. I know. She says you're taking everything from her. I looked at Olivia. I'm taking responsibility. She didn't say anything, but she didn't look confused either. I spent the evening packing my things into the duffel, slow and methodical. Not because I was leaving, because order matters. I labeled the folder one last time and slid it into the bag. Paperwork doesn't raise its voice. It doesn't need to. Once it's in motion, everything else adjusts around it. I signed the final agreement on my laptop at the folding table, the cursor blinking for a second before I clicked confirm. No dramatic pause. No shaking hands. Just a clean signature and a timestamp. The sale price sat there in black text, ordinary and precise. $420,000. Not a windfall. Not a statement. Just the number that closed the file. The buyer wired the deposit the same afternoon. Mark Ellis forwarded the confirmation with a short note. Funds received. Closing on schedule. I printed it and added it to the folder. Heather didn't know yet. That part wasn't strategy. It was timing. She was out of the house most of that day, running back-to-back sessions. I could hear her voice through the open windows when I stepped outside, calm and reassuring, telling people about release and clarity. The words floated over the driveway like they belonged to someone else's life. When she came home, the energy shifted immediately. Not because she knew what had happened, but because she felt it. She stopped in the doorway and scanned the room, eyes narrowing. What did you do? She asked. I handled things, I said. That's not an answer. It's the same one I've been giving. She dropped her bag on the counter. You're being deliberately vague. I'm being accurate. She paced once, then turned on me. You can't just make decisions that affect everyone. I can make decisions that affect my property. She stared at me. You're bluffing. I didn't respond. The notice arrived the next morning. Certified. Signature required. Mark had it delivered early before Heather's first call. I was in the garage when I heard her open the door, the paper rustle, then the sound she made when she read the first line. Not a scream, not a cry, just a sharp intake of breath like she'd missed a step. She came into the garage without knocking, holding the envelope like it was something dirty. What is this? She demanded. It's notice, I said. Notice of what? Change. Her face flushed. You're evicting me. I'm selling. She laughed, loud and brittle. You can't sell my house. It's not yours. She shook her head hard. That's not true. It is. She stepped closer. I took care of Mom. I kept this place running. You left. I served, I said. And I came back. That doesn't give you the right to do this. It does. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her eyes darted around the garage like she was looking for something to grab onto. You're doing this to hurt me, she said. I'm doing it to resolve a problem. This is a punishment. It's a transaction. She let out a short, disbelieving laugh. You're unbelievable. I nodded. I've been told. She stormed out, slamming the door so hard the light flickered. I waited a beat, then went back to the table and checked my email. The buyer had requested one minor repair credit. I approved it without comment. That afternoon, Heather tried a different approach. Softer, quieter. She stood in the doorway, arms loose at her sides. "We can talk," she said. "You don't have to do this." "I already did. You didn't even warn me." "I didn't need to," she swallowed. "Where am I supposed to go?" "You have 30 days. That's not enough time. It's standard." She looked at me like she didn't recognize me. "You're cold." "I'm consistent." She shook her head and backed away, muttering about betrayal and family. The words didn't land. They slid off unused. The house changed after that. Not immediately. Gradually. Fewer clients, shorter sessions. Heather stopped playing music during the day. She moved through the rooms like she was cataloging them, touching walls, opening cabinets, counting what she thought was hers. Olivia avoided both of us. She stayed late at school. When she was home, she kept her door closed. One evening, she knocked on the garage door, hesitant. "Is it true?" she asked. "About the house?" "Yes." She nodded slowly. "Mom says you tricked her." "I didn't." She looked down. "I didn't think so." That was all she said before leaving. The buyer's inspectors came back for a final check. Quick, professional. Heather stayed in her room the entire time. She didn't come out until they left. Closing day arrived without ceremony. I signed the final documents electronically. Mark confirmed the transfer. Funds deposited. File closed. I sat on the crate and stared at the confirmation email for a moment, not because it felt surreal, but because it felt done. Done is quieter than people expect. Heather didn't speak to me that night. Or the next. She moved around the house with clipped efficiency, packing boxes, stacking them in the hallway. She didn't ask for help. I didn't offer. On the third day, she confronted me again, this time with anger stripped of performance. "You ruined everything," she said. "I changed the terms. You could have talked to me." "I did." "You could have compromised." "I offered clarity." She scoffed. "You think paperwork makes you right?" "No," I said. "It makes things real." She stared at me like she wanted to say something else, something that might land. She couldn't find it. The movers came at the end of the week. They worked quickly, quietly loading boxes into a truck. Heather supervised with tight movements, correcting them when they placed something wrong. Control was all she had left. I stayed in the garage organizing my own bag. Not because I had to leave yet, because I wanted my things ready. When the truck pulled away, the house felt hollow. No candles, no music, just walls and air. Heather stood in the driveway, arms crossed, watching it disappear. She didn't look at me. I went back inside and locked the door behind me, then set the keys on the counter. The weight of them felt different now. Not symbolic, practical. Paperwork doesn't care about narratives. It doesn't argue. It moves forward, and everything else has to follow. I picked up the keys from the counter and dropped them into my pocket, then walked through the house one last time without stopping. Not to remember, just to verify. Cabinets empty, closets bare. No boxes left behind that would turn into questions later. The house sounded different now. Not quiet the way it had been during sessions, but empty. Empty as honest. Heather stayed in her room while I moved. The door was closed. No music. No phone calls. Just the muffled sound of drawers opening and shutting, steady and sharp. I didn't knock. We were past that. I loaded my duffel into the car and sat behind the wheel for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel, engine off. I wasn't waiting for anything, just letting the stillness settle before I broke it. Olivia came out onto the porch as I opened the door. She held something in her hand, folded once. "Mom said not to bother you," she said. "Okay." She hesitated. I wanted to say goodbye. "You don't have to." "I know." She handed me the folded paper. "I found this in a drawer. It's from Grandma." I opened it carefully. A note in Mom's handwriting. Short, direct, no sentimentality. Just a reminder to take care of myself and not let guilt decide things for me. I folded it back the same way. "Thanks," I said. Olivia nodded. "I'm staying with a friend for a bit." "That's probably smart." She looked toward the house, then back at me. "She's really angry." "I know," but she added quieter, "Now she's wrong." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Olivia had already decided what mattered to her. I got in the car and started the engine. The sound filled the driveway, loud and clean. Heather didn't come out. She didn't wave. She didn't say anything. That was fine. I drove away without checking the mirrors. The new place was small. A one-bedroom on the edge of town. Nothing special. Clean walls, neutral carpet, a working lock. I signed the lease, carried my bag inside, and set it on the floor. The silence there was different. Not managed, not enforced. It didn't come with expectations. It just existed. I unpacked slowly. Not everything, just what I needed. Laptop on the table, boots by the door, folder in the drawer. I made coffee and sat on the floor back against the wall mug, warm in my hands. My phone buzzed once. A message from Mark Ellis. Sale complete. Funds confirmed. All clear. I replied with one word, thanks. I didn't check my balance. I didn't need to. The number wasn't the point. The closure was. That night I slept without setting an alarm. I woke up when the light came through the blinds and sat there for a moment listening. No footsteps. No doors. No voices. Just the hum of a refrigerator somewhere down the hall and a car passing on the street. I stood up, stretched, and made coffee again. Black. No labels. No notes. Over the next few days, I handled the rest of it the same way I'd handled everything else. Forwarded mail. Updated addresses. Closed the P.O. box. Sent one final email to the agent confirming receipt. No follow-ups required. Heather didn't reach out. Not to apologize. Not to explain. Not to ask for help. She didn't post anything either, at least not that I saw. Silence can be its own response. Olivia texted once. Just a thumbs-up emoji and a photo of a dog she was watching. I replied with niece. That was enough. I went back to base the following week. Routine picked up where it left off. Meetings, briefings, paperwork. No one there knew about the house or the garage or the rules. They didn't need to. That part of my life stayed where it belonged. Every now and then, someone would ask how my time off had been. I'd say fine, because it was. Not easy, not warm, but fine. People think revenge has to be loud to count. They think it needs witnesses. An outburst. A final confrontation where everyone understands exactly what they lost. It doesn't. Sometimes it's just refusing to argue with someone who expects you to. Sometimes it's reading the documents instead of reacting to the story. Sometimes it's walking away with everything settled and nothing left to negotiate. I didn't burn anything down. I didn't expose her. I didn't make speeches or demand apologies. I followed the process, closed the file, and moved on. The house was never the point. Neither was the money. What mattered was deciding that I didn't need to earn space from someone who didn't own it. The last thing I did before turning in that night was place Mom's note in the folder with the rest of the paperwork. Not because it belonged there, but because it reminded me why I trusted the process in the first place. I turned off the light and lay back, hands folded behind my head, staring at the ceiling of a place that didn't ask me to be anything other than present. No rules taped to the walls. No expectations written in marker. No one tracking my movements or weighing my contribution. Just a door I could lock from the inside. That was enough. I didn't walk away feeling victorious. I walked away feeling settled. There's a difference. Some family revenge stories don't end with shouting or apologies. They end with paperwork signed, keys turned in, and silence that finally feels safe. I didn't win by being louder. I won by staying calm, reading the fine print, and choosing peace over permission. And sometimes that's the most uncomfortable kind of justice for the people who thought they controlled the story. If this kind of family revenge story feels familiar to you, the quiet kind where no one screams but everything changes, you're not alone. I share real grounded revenge stories like this family drama where the truth comes out slowly and the consequences are real. Subscribe to the channel if you want more stories where patience beats chaos and walking away is the final move.